Good morning, everybody. Today is September the 2nd, 2016. This is Pastor Barbara, aka Preacher with Parrots. We're in our Sunday morning program. On Sunday mornings, we're going through the study of end time prophecy. Today is probably you're going to find it as one of the more interesting ones we've done. At the same time, we have a live program on myvlog.tv. So once in a while, you may see me distracted looking over at another screen, talking to somebody that you don't see here. And that's what's going on. Most of what we hear in end time prophecy are things that I brought up in the last few weeks. As an example, things that have happened that may make it appear that we are much closer to the rapture than we think. I mentioned before, I'm old. One of my doctors told me that. She said, even if you don't get better, remember, you're old. She stopped short of saying, well, you got to die of something. You can't just drop dead. I always thought I would die before the rapture because I'm old. And however, with the things that went on last month and the month before in Jerusalem, first of all, with this union of three Abrahamic religions talking about joining and making one religion, we know that's something that's going to happen during the tribulation. So when we see signs here that that might happen, and we know that it's going to happen in the tribulation, it starts making us think that the rapture or the resurrection of the saints is very close. That's usually what people preach about when they're preaching about the rapture or end time prophecy. Today, we're talking about the second coming. Many people get the second coming mixed up with the rapture. Jesus was born in Bethlehem. Obviously, that's his first coming. We see Jesus come in the clouds, and we hear people say things like, Jesus is coming soon. So we figure, some people do, that must be the second coming. It isn't. It's the resurrection of the saints or the rapture. And the reason it's not the second coming is that Christ doesn't come to the earth. He comes in the clouds. And the saints are resurrected, the ones who have passed away. And then those who haven't passed away are resurrected. So the second coming, in our studies, we haven't had it yet. We have had the rapture, and we have had the tribulation. We've gotten to the end of the tribulation. I consider that we have concluded the tribulation, but there's another thing or two about it I could say, and then we do the second coming. For those of you that watch my Twitter or Facebook page, you saw pictures of Jesus coming on a white horse. The pictures show him wearing red garments because the Bible actually says it's dipped in the blood. And then behind them, you see a lot of other people coming on white horses. Who are they? Well, if you've been born again and you're living for the Lord, that's you. Let's back up. When we studied the tribulation, we had three separate occasions when we had seven, I called them terrible things that happened. There's names for them, but I prefer one that's descriptive. The very last one is actually happens at the second coming. First of all, the population of Earth will be much less than it is now. We've gone through 7 years of tribulation. Those 3 times 7, or 21 terrible things that happened. Some of them were diseases. Some of them were earthquakes. Some of them were damaging the water so that ships couldn't travel on salt water or on oceans. Some of them were destroying water in wells and lakes and rivers, fresh water that people need for drinking. They've been bit by bugs. They've gone through 20 terrible, terrible things. And each one has cost lives. And now, Jews, Israelis, we're down to 2/3 or 3/4 are no longer alive. The wars and the last 3.5 years have cost lives. A remnant, a small group of people, of Jews, have gone off to a place that most Bible scholars think is Petra. If you Google a map of the Dead Sea, you'll see that there's a national border that goes right through the middle of the Dead Sea. It's a saltwater lake. Half of that is Israel, and the eastern half is Jordan. Crossing from Israel to Jordan is like going from Texas to Laredo or San Diego to Tijuana. You just walk across the border, walk back. It's not difficult. It isn't like it's another country, like it's Iran or Iraq or Syria or Egypt or some other country. Because the Bible describes where it is, Petra fits the description. But not only does it fit the description of where it is located geographically, but Petra is a place that if you're walking, now if you're in an airplane and you jump out with the parachute, you can parachute wherever you want to and hope you don't land in a tree. But if you're coming in a vehicle, you can't get into, there's a safe place in Petra. You can't get a vehicle in there. It's a city that's formed from the digging out of a rock. And there's a very narrow passageway. So it's a place where once you get there, even though it's no secret that you're there, you're pretty safe because you can knock off the people coming in before they get in, and you're pretty safe. A remnant of the Jews are there, and they've been there for a couple of years. And they will survive. The second coming is going to affect the whole world. Let me tell you briefly what's going to happen. And it's amazing. You may never, it's possible, you may never have heard it before. As I say, preachers have 52 Sundays a year. And we have Mother's Day and Father's Day and Christmas and Easter/Resurrection. Um, we have to choose our topics wisely. In my case, I just go through the Bible, and wherever I left is where I go on. But the first thing that's going to happen when the bloodshed is great, I mean, people will be walking through it. I don't mean 20 minutes of rain. I'm talking a flood. The bloodshed, especially in Jerusalem, will be terrible. Jesus comes now. Where has he been for 7 years? And he comes with the saints. And I use the word saints. And the reason I don't just say Christians or believers is because to some people, a Christian means you're not an atheist. You're not Jewish. You're not Buddhist. You're not Muslim. You're Christian. And the way the Bible uses the term is you are a believer. You've been washed in the blood of Christ, and you're living for him. And that's why I prefer to use the word saints instead of the word Christians. In the rapture, which has been 7.5 years ago, first thing that happened was those who were dead and they were born again Christian saints when they died. They're going to come out of their graves, and in their spirits, or around their spirits, will be a glorified body. Their body won't be like mine. I can't walk through a door. I can't fly. If I want to go from one place to another, I've got to take a bus, get on a plane, something like that. Because we don't have glorified bodies. At that moment, those saints will have glorified bodies. As soon as the saints, we're talking about the rapture now, 7.5 years ago, the moment they are raptured, those that are alive will rise up to meet Jesus in the clouds. When he comes in the clouds, there will be a lot of angels with him also. And those born again Christian saints will meet him in the air. Where have they been for 7+ years? And where has Jesus been? It's what we call the marriage supper of the Lamb. Now I have to remind you, from what the New Testament tells us and from what I check out with people who still live in the Middle East, they still do this. At the tail end of the wedding feast, the bride and the groom go off and celebrate what you and I call the wedding night. It's not at night. They go off into a tent, into her room, into a place her mother has prepared. And there, her purity is proved, her virginity, because in many cases, the marriage hinges upon her being a virgin. And if it's learned during that interval in the marriage supper, that she's not kept herself pure, then the wedding is off. So we have a long wedding supper. The length of the party lasts from a few hours to a couple of weeks, depending on how much money the father of the bride and the groom have to put into it. So you have a long period of wedding supper, but you have a short interval when the bride and the groom literally become one. They become husband and wife. Now, with that in mind, for the period of time we've been studying, the first 3.5 years of the tribulation and the last 3.5 years of the tribulation, during that period of time, they have been in the wedding feast, the party, the food. At the very end, and we read it a couple of times in Revelations, first when we went through the book of Revelation, and then when we got to that part, the actual wedding ceremony. And this is the part that is in Handel's Messiah. Hallelujah. Glory to God in the highest. It's in this part of Handel's Messiah, the Hallelujah chorus, that King George was so emotional, he stood up, and when the king stands, everybody else stands. You know, if you're in school and the teacher does something out of respect for someone who comes in, or the flag or whatever, then everybody, all the students in the room, follow what the teacher does. And when King George stood, everybody stood. That's why everybody stands when the Hallelujah chorus is sung live, not a recording, not a video. But if it's being done live and you are there present where it's being done live, you stand. For 7 years, they have been, and it's difficult for us to understand this, I realize that. For 7 years, they've been in the wedding feast. But now Christ comes with the church. The saints, who are they? They are the bride of Christ. All of us together are united with Christ. And when Christ returns to the earth for the second time, not in Bethlehem, but he actually steps on planet Earth for the second time, he has his bride with him. And his bride is those of us that have been bought with his blood and are living for him. Now he comes, and I tried to find some pictures. Let me see if I have anything I can show you real quickly here. Don't know about that word quickly. Here we go. Jesus comes to the Mount of Olives. I'm going to show you a map on my cell phone of the old city of Jerusalem and the Mount of Olives and the Garden of Gethsemane. So you'll have an idea where he's coming. Now, before Jesus left earth, Luke, the last chapter, Acts, the first chapter, he stood on the Mount of Olives. And then his disciples were there. A cloud came down and engulfed him. And the cloud and Jesus began to rise. And the disciples, what's going on? And the angel said, as you see him go away, so will you see him return. When they saw him again, he returned in a cloud. But now he's coming to earth, and he's coming to the place where he left it. The old city, I believe, I don't think they've done it in the last number of years. When I was there, it was the 14th wall around the city. The city has enlarged, and they build a wall around the whole city. I'm going to show you where the old city is, where Jesus was when he was arrested in Gethsemane, where he prayed in Gethsemane, and where the Mount of Olives is. Let's see. I got to get it so I can get it on both cameras at the same time. You see where the old city is? Look to the right, and you see the Mount of Olives. You see a square. Look where the word mount is, and go to your left. And you'll see a square. That's where the temple was. I don't know if I can show you this, but right there is Gethsemane. As soon as you walk out of the city, you're in the Garden of Gethsemane. And the Garden of Gethsemane is the entrance to the Mount of Olives. There we go, right there. This is the garden. This is the temple. This is the Temple Mount. This is the temple. Not working out for me, is it? And there is the Mount of Olives. So this is where Jesus sets his feet, right there. The moment he does. And here are the things that you've probably never heard of before. First of all, I don't think you can say it all in one sermon, so most pastors would be stuck trying to explain all of this in half hour or 45 minutes or however long as people will sit and let him preach without going home and getting lunch. When he steps foot, gets off that horse, white horse, and steps his foot on the Mount of Olives. Hi, Larry. First of all, it will be a worldwide thing. Everybody in the world will see him. Whether this is through the internet, through satellite, I have no idea. If I have no idea, can you imagine how people, when I was a little girl, managed to preach it? The whole world would see him. How could all the whole world see something at the same time? It wasn't possible years ago. Now it is. When he steps foot on the Mount of Olives, there will be earthquakes throughout the world. At that time, some islands are going to be missing. Now, what I'm going to do this morning is I'm giving you a brief story of what's going to happen. And then I'm going to go and start reading you the scriptures that tell us that. Well, why don't I just read the scriptures and let that be it? Well, we can't do that because they're all over the place. Every prophet wrote about every future time. So we have to put them all together. So let me just tell you what happens, and then I'll go get the scriptures to prove that what I'm saying is true. there will be worldwide earthquakes. Because from now on, Jesus is in charge of the world. Right now, no more Satan. He's going to be cast into the pit of hell for a long time. And Jesus is now the world ruler. Let's stop for a minute and go back over the world rulers. First it was Egypt. Then it was Assyria. Then Nebuchadnezzar had his dream that Daniel interpreted, and we get the rest of them. The third, or the first one of that image, was Babylon, which is Iraq. The next one was Persia, which is Iran. The next world empire, the one that overthrew Persia, were the Greeks. The one that overthrew the Greeks was the Roman Empire. That meant the Roman Empire ruled the world. Not everybody lived in Rome, but their influence ran the world. At the end of that period of time, the 449 years stops. And we're left with 7 years left over, and that's the 7 years of the tribulation. And then, what's the next empire after the Roman Empire? There's two more. World rulers. What's the next one after the Roman Empire? It's a combination of the Roman Empire and somebody else. In the image that Nebuchadnezzar saw, it showed up as iron legs coming from head, chest, stomach, thighs, legs, feet, stone. The Roman Empire was the feet of iron. The next one, the feet, were partly iron, so part of the old Roman Empire, and partly clay. Clay has no strength, no durability, and it doesn't last long. And that's the empire, or the time when the whole world is being run by the Antichrist. And you serve him, you take his mark, or you can't buy food, you can't buy groceries, you can't pay rent, you can't buy a house. But then there was one other way, and that's a stone. In this dream that Nebuchadnezzar had, a stone not made with hands comes out of heaven, hits the feet of that beast, or a stone comes out of heaven, not made by hands, so it's not a human ruler, because that would be an ordinary human being. But a stone coming out of heaven, not made with human hands, hits that last empire, which is the Antichrist empire. And that is the last world ruler. And that is Christ. And he will rule for 1,000 years on earth. After the 1,000 years, the new heaven comes down. And then no more earth. Now, we've come to where Jesus comes on a white horse, wearing a garment that's dipped in blood. And when his foot steps on the Mount of Olives, there will be earthquakes and islands will disappear. Now, let me tell you something that I find interesting. I was one of the first groups of people that wasn't wealthy that went to Hawaii. It was in 1960. I'd been making $60 a month teaching in a Bible college. Room and board. Of course, I had a trailer, so Rosa and I lived in the trailer. And we got our food free. We plugged into electricity and water free. I made $60 a month for 3 years. Obviously, I didn't have money saved up to go anywhere on vacation. But I started then, after that, teaching in public school. And in the second year that I was teaching in public school, I didn't have a lot of money, but I had been teaching for a couple of years, and I had a credit card by then, and I had a salary that was guaranteed. And so I could afford a vacation. And I passed by a place that sells tickets to other places and bought 2 trips for Rose and I to go to Hawaii during Christmas break. It was about the second or third group that had gone. So really, a lot of the touristy stuff that they do now, they didn't do then. And it was quite informative. We were told how the Hawaiian Islands were formed. Think about this. You couldn't take a horse to Hawaii. We had friends that went to live in Hawaii, and they had a horse and some dogs. And to go to Hawaii with animals, you have to leave the animals on an island, small island, not one of the Hawaiian islands, but some place off, or a boat. You could not bring them to Hawaii until a period of they proved they didn't have disease. And we remember our friend with the horse, she couldn't do that. She took her dogs, but not her horse. She felt very, very bad. But why Hawaii was disease-free, and other places around it had diseases, and Hawaii didn't. Because Hawaii was a new land. Where did Hawaii come from? Hawaii was a series of volcanoes. Volcanoes come from earthquakes. Now, we have earthquakes here in California. The earth shakes, things fall off the walls, and that's it. Sometimes buildings crumble. If you're underwater, let's say this is the level of water, and under here is your earth, and you have an earthquake down here. Well, all this underwater earth moves around and comes up. So now if you're a boat, you got to be careful not to hit this land. And you have another earthquake, and this happens. And you have another earthquake, and you got an island. That's how the Hawaiian Islands, according to what they told me, that's how the Hawaiian Islands were born. And that's why they had no disease. They didn't come by people bringing dirt from someplace else and dumping it there. It came from underwater dirt, and through a series of earthquakes, volcanoes, that type of thing, is how the islands were formed. Keeping that in mind, it makes a lot of sense that when the whole world suffers earthquakes, there will be islands that disappeared, because some of those islands that were up here, the same earthquake that caused them to rise, that same earthquake can cause them to go down. So for the islands that exist because of previous earthquakes, the earthquake that happens at the second coming of Christ, it makes sense that those islands will disappear. That's one of the things that will happen. There will be hailstones that will fall. Now, some of them are different versions of the English Bible translated differently. Pick between 57 and 100 pounds that hail will come. I was in West Texas in a couple of hailstorms. My dad was working at a Buick dealership, and I was home from college in the summer. And it started to hail. Well, you know, if you're selling expensive new cars, you get them out where people can see them. They wanted all the new cars inside. So take away the cars they're working on. Get all the new cars inside somewhere, in the showroom, in the repair rooms, get them inside. And then take the better of the used cars and get them under a roof. They had a shade place. Get them under there so that your more expensive cars are protected. And they said, can you drive? And I said, yeah, but not this year's model. That's okay, drive. Get the new ones in, get the other ones in. Hailstorm this big. And they gave me a box. I mean, I'm a city girl from Detroit. What do I know about hail and stones like this in West Texas? They gave me a cardboard box, and they said, don't go anywhere without having this thing. I don't know, a big hailstone, what a cardboard box is going to do. But anyway, that's what they told me. That's what we did. Hailstorms like that, stones will fall. Water supply will be changed. I'm going to read, and I'm going to use the Holman Bible today. I'm going to get this out of my way. I'm going to read some scripture. Now, the scripture that I read will not necessarily be in the order in which the things are happening, because I'm picking them as much as possible in order. But every prophet that wrote about these did not say, okay, everybody, the next few paragraphs I write have to do with the second coming. It's not that easy. We don't know what they're going to write about until they write it, and we have to figure out where in the whole history of what's going on, where these things fall. Let me read a few things, and let me read some scriptures. The Lord will go out and fight against those nations as when he fights on a day of battle. On the day his feet shall stand on the Mount of Olives that lies before Jerusalem to the east. The Mount of Olives will be split in two. Now, it's not a mountain. I live at 6,000 feet. And nothing in Jerusalem is over 3,500. but it's a higher place. In other words, the side of the street where I live in the San Bernardino Mountains is higher than my neighbors across the street. I have to look down a couple 100 feet. And when I do, I see the tops of their houses. So it will split in two from the east to the west, and there'll be a wide valley, and one half of the mountain will look to the north and one half will look to the south. Those last 7 plagues or terrible things that happened, the very last one is this. The 7th angel poured his bowl into the air, and a voice came out of the temple. Whoa, hold on. The temple? Remember that 3.5 years through the temple, the Antichrist walks in and desecrates it. How? Well, first of all, by walking in. He can't go into the Holy of Holies. I was telling you that last week when I was telling you about the possible or the attempt for the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem to appoint a high priest. He didn't accept. I have seen 2 people beside myself that have done blogs or videos that tell people he didn't accept. There are hundreds saying he's the new high priest. But only the high priest can go in to the Holy of Holies one time a year. That time of year is coming up on October 11th. Now, there's Rosh Hashanah and some other Jewish feasts that are coming up where the temple would be used, but not the Holy of Holies. So we have a temple that has been built, and 3.5 years ago, from what I'm talking about now, the high priest went in, the Antichrist went in and desecrated it and said, you don't worship here anymore, you worship me, I'm your God. That's been 3.5 years ago. There is a temple. We don't have Jewish worship happening at the temple. There are no Christians there doing anything at the temple at the time frame I'm talking about. So out of the temple comes a voice. That's like out of the middle of Lake Arrowhead comes a voice. Or an abandoned house, and out of this empty house comes a voice. The city splits into 3 parts, but the Mount of Olives splits into 2. There were flashes of lightnings, rumblings, peals of thunders, a great earthquake such as there had never been since man was on earth. And it's the earthquakes that caused. And by the way, when this was written, what did they know about earthquakes? When I came out to California, what did I know about earthquakes? But I've lived through some 6-point-something earthquakes, 2 of them really, 2 big ones, one big one and one pretty big. Depends how close you are to the epicenter. Jerusalem, I've told you this before, has faults. The wall, where the Western Wall, the Wailing Wall, that's divided into half for the males to worship and pray and half for women. Since I was there was a small earthquake, and the women's side has been reduced in size. I've seen it on pictures, but the last time, when I was there, it was before the earthquake, and that's on the Temple Mount. So we're talking earthquake country. We're not talking earthquake country like Japan and Hawaii, but we're talking like Southern California earthquakes. Great hailstones, about 100 pounds, well, I said 57 to 100 pounds, will fall from heaven on people, and they will curse God for the hail. They won't curse God because of what the Antichrist did to them. But now that Jesus steps on the Mount of Olives and hail comes down, they curse God for it. Let me see if I have that. Revelation 16, 17. Let me read it to you. Here we go. Then the seventh poured out his bowl into the air, and a loud voice came out of the sanctuary from the throne. It's the Holy of Holies, saying, "It is done." What was the last thing Jesus said from the cross? One of the things he said was, "Father, forgive them, they know not what they do." One of the things he said, "Mary, here's your son. John, this is your mother. Take care of each other." The last thing he said was, "It is finished." That finished his first time on earth. And he did everything and fulfilled every prophecy and did everything he needed to do in order to guarantee our salvation. But now we have this worldwide earthquake, but from the temple, a voice comes out and says, "This great city split into 3 parts. And the cities of the nations," this is worldwide, "Babylon the Great was remembered in God's presence." What does that mean? What was the last thing Babylon did and King Nebuchadnezzar before he carted off the Jews? He destroyed the city and he destroyed the temple. The great city split 3 parts, and the cities and the nations fell. Babylon the Great was remembered in God's presence. He gave her the cup filled with the wine of his anger. Every island fled and the mountains disappeared. Enormous hailstones, each weighing about 100 pounds, this one says 100 pounds too, fell from heaven on the people, and they blasphemed God for the plague of hail because the plague was extremely severe. All right, let me see if I can keep something there so I don't lose my place when I want to go back there. Let's look at 2 places in Revelation. 8:5. The angel took the incense burner, filled it with fire from the altar, and hurled it to the earth. And there were thunders, rumblings, lightnings, and an earthquake. And the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared to blow them. This is earlier in that 7 years of tribulation. So this is just letting you know. So now let's go to 11:19. God's sanctuary in heaven was opened, and the ark of his covenant appeared in his sanctuary. And there were lightnings, rumblings, thunders, an earthquake, and severe hail. That's from the book of Revelation. Joel chapter 3 talks about the fact that from now on, foreigners, from the time Jesus returns to Israel for a 1,000-year rule, foreigners will never rule Jerusalem. And that is Joel 3. And those minor prophets are harder to find because they only have a page or two there. 3:14. Multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of the Lord is near, and the valley of decision. The sun and moon will grow dark, and the stars will cease their shining. The Lord will roar from Zion and raise his voice from Jerusalem. Heaven and earth will shake, and the Lord will be a refuge for his people, a stronghold for the Israelites. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God who dwells in Zion. My holy mountain Jerusalem will be holy. Remember now, in a little bit, and I'll check the time here. I don't want to go make this video too long. I won't get through everything that happens, but we'll get through some of it. Foreigners will never overrun it again. Why? Because for the next 1,000 years, Jesus is king. And then the earth is destroyed and a new heaven comes down. Before that, there will be the judgment. Goats go this way. Sheep go this way. So we don't have the judgment of sinners until after the 1,000-year reign of Christ. And I'll just give you a few things this morning to think about. Some of the things that will be going on for this 1,000 years. But it said foreigners will never overrun it again, because Jesus will be king for the next 1,000 years, and then the earth will be destroyed and new heaven will come down. In that day, the mountains will drip with sweet wine, and the hills will flow with milk, and the streams of Judah will flow with water. And a spring will issue out of the Lord's house, watering the valley of Acacias. Now let's talk about some of the places that had been enemies to Israel. Egypt will become desolate, and Edom a desert wasteland because of the violence done to the people of Judah, in whose land they shed innocent blood. But Judah will be, that's where Jerusalem is. Judah will be inhabited forever, and Jerusalem from generation to generation. One generation dies, the next generation will be there. I will pardon their blood guilt, which I have not pardoned, for the Lord lives in Zion. Let me go to some more information. There's going to be a period of time the Bible mentions two different figures. If we add them together, We have 30 days, and then there's another 45 days. That's a period of time from the time that Jesus' feet hit the Mountain of Olives, we have the earthquake that splits, and Jesus actually sets up his kingdom. And it seems reasonable because we will rule. Oh yeah, we're on horses, on white horses, behind the white horse Jesus is riding on. We will rule. Who will we rule? Well, maybe with this, I'll close the teaching for today, and then we'll talk about it if you like. Who will we rule? Who will be in Jerusalem for 1,000 years? Well, I don't know whether you've considered this before. There will be two kinds of people, not black and white, not fat and skinny. There will be two kinds of people. First of all, let's talk about the people like you and I right now. Seven plus years ago, when Jesus came in the air, didn't come to earth, but came in the air, he first took the saints who had died and resurrected them, and they went to be with him in the air. Now they've got glorified bodies. This old body, like mine, doesn't raise up and go anywhere. It can't fly. So these saints who were dead, their bodies were in the graves. Their spirits are now in a glorified body. For 7 years, they've been in the marriage supper of the Lamb. Then they rode in on white horses with Jesus. Now, they're going to be there for 1,000 years. Saints that had died on earth, went in the rapture, have glorified bodies, are now going to be 1,000 years. They are married to Christ. We are ruling. They are ruling. They are in Jerusalem. Okay, Jesus came in the rapture. The dead in Christ rise first. Then those that are alive. Okay, let's assume something doesn't get to me and I go in the rapture. And let's assume the rapture comes as soon as I think it's going to come. Those that are alive will meet Christ in the air. Now we're with him in the 7 years of the wedding feast of the Lamb. We, the body of Christ, are married to him. We are one with Christ now. We will be with him. Who's left? Well, who's left are the non-believers. They're the ones they write all the movies about. The people who Jesus came and they weren't ready and they were driving an airplane and the airplane went down, and those that were not ready, where are they? It's only been 7+ years ago. Where are they? They're still on earth. Maybe some have died in a period of 7+ years, 7 years and a few months. That could happen. But a lot of people are still going to be alive. They're still not born again. They're still living on earth. Jesus is now ruling the earth from Jerusalem. So in the world, we will have people that are born again and people that aren't. We will have Jews. Now, they're going to become former Jews at the second coming of Christ. Let me give you this example. I got relatives, distant relatives. I've never seen them. They've never seen me. I know my dad's brothers and sisters and who they married, and I know some of the kids. In fact, I think I know all the kids, all of my cousins. But I don't know the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren and the great. I have no clue who they are. Now, because news gets around in the family, my distant cousins have heard of Barbara Shelton. They know the year I was born. They know my dad's first name. They know my mom's first name. They know my dad was buried first. They knew that I buried them next to the old country church in Missouri. They don't know who Preacher with Parrots is. Once in a while, someone will come out to California or somebody will write me a letter or something and find out Preacher with Parrots is taught in Bible colleges. Preacher with Parrots taught public school. Preacher with Parrots has been preaching on the internet for 10 plus years now. If you Google Preacher with Parrots, you get my Twitter, my YouTube. You're a preacher with parrots? I thought you were Barbara Shelton. Well, I am. The Jews are looking for a Messiah. The Jews know all about who Jesus is. They just don't know he's Messiah. That's the best example I can come up with. But these Jews who are looking for Messiah to come and save them don't realize he already came. And he saved them not from the Roman Empire that they hoped to be saved from, but he saves them from their sins because of his sacrifice on Calvary. So one thing, now all the Jews, some say when they see the nail prints in his hands, who knows? It's a nice saying. I think it's a beautiful thought. I can't testify to the veracity of it. But I believe that immediately all the Jews will know who Jesus is. There will be some Jews ruling. There will be some Gentiles ruling. There will be some that lived through the rapture but weren't saved. And then after the rapture, they thought, oh, I blew it. And they didn't take the mark of the beast. And they survived. Then there's going to be another group of people who didn't take the mark of the beast and died. Remember when we were studying the book of Revelation that we had some that were under the altar and they said, cannot we leave from here? And the Lord said, no, because there's others that will be added to your number. There's other people that are going to lose their lives rather than follow the Antichrist. So we're going to have people who were alive during the rapture. Now, they haven't been judged yet. They will not be judged. The sheep from the goats, the go to heaven, go to hell. Judgment does not come until the end of the 1,000 years. To make it even more different and more difficult for you all to figure out, Satan will be bound in a pit for almost 1,000 years. Can you imagine what earth would be like if we didn't have the devil? Well, that's what it'll be like. We will not be carnivores. If you go to McDonald's, you're going to get a salad. Children will play with snakes and not be bitten. Animals that eat other animals will now be eating grass and hay. The lamb will lay down with the lion. A child will be safe. There is no Satan. Every bad thing that happens on earth because of him, well, he's not going to be there. Now, he will be released at the end. Why? Probably, and we can, who are we to say why God does what he does? I mean, we say that God does this because, and we don't know. What's going on? The birds or the dog or somebody's doing something. I guess it's the baby lovebirds. We should be having a new, the eggs have all turned dark. We should be having a new bunch here in another day or two. I checked this morning. We have no babies yet, but we should be having probably by this time next week. They started laying the eggs on the 3rd, but you don't start counting until she actually sits on them. And so we have 21, 25 days, something like that, after that time. So that's what that 1,000 years will be like. But most of us feel that the reasons, we know that Satan will be released at the end for a little bit. And some people will follow him, just like some people follow him now. We believe that it's logical that Satan is being released because some of these people have never been tempted. Remember, they're looking toward the last little bit of the 1,000 years. 1,000 years is a long time. The last part of 1,000 years, we have, of course, the people with the glorified bodies will not be having babies. But the people who are on earth and survived are in normal bodies. They will be having children. There will be no results of what Satan does while he's locked up. Therefore, there will be children that have been born that have never been tempted. And just before the earth is destroyed and the new heaven comes down, there'll be a judgment. Now, Christians have already been judged. We either went in the rapture or we didn't. Those who were tribulation saints that refused to serve Satan Um, it's different with them. Why should these new babies coming along during a period of 1,000 years never been tempted? And they're going to be judged along with those who have been tempted and withstood. Most of us feel that that's why Satan will be um, alive until will be brought back for a short while. I'm going to close now. I know I told you a lot of things you probably never heard of before in your life. Think about it. I'll bring a few more things up next week, um, probably a couple of weeks, to go through the 1,000-year period where Christ rules. It's called the millennium. Millennium means 1,000. And that's the topic we'll be on for the next little bit. Let me close the video. I'll be with my group chat here in a minute. Until the next video, blessings on you.